Morning Talk with Najma Kota, and we're very grateful to our guest, Dr. T.K. Harris, who's agreed to be with us for this hour. Dr. T.K. Harris is a prominent neuropsychiatrist described as unique in his ability to combine Islamic and medical sciences. A doctor of the mind, he qualified in medicine in Oxford and has worked at the highest levels in medicine. These days, he does research into high performance and exceptional talent and creates media to make it easy for people to know how to live well, an area known as mental wealth. He has written 7 books and is the chair of the nonprofit Mental Health Access Mission, providing mental health care free of charge to people in regions of need. Among his activities, he also coaches high performing academics, high achievers, and sports people on how to consistently achieve their highest performance. He is an ambassador for mental health on behalf of the UNESCO Fund in Africa. He is based in the UK. As you recall, we did have Dr. D.K. Harris on this segment of the program, Islamic Psychology, the wellness segment, and we take great pleasure in welcoming him back to Mid Morning Talk. Assalamu
Assalamu
alaikum and welcome. Wa alaikum salam wa
alaikum
rahmatullah.
wa rahmatullahi
How,
wa barakatuh. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, how are you, Dr. TK?
Alhamdulillah, very well. Yeah, enjoying life at the moment. How are things that side? How can I be of help to you today?
Well, I think we have quite an interesting topic, and I'm happy that my producer Fazila, chose particularly this one and to speak to you about it. And that is family relationships and their connection to your overall well-being. Now, I think this is really, really broad. I don't think that we should be only focused on, to start off with, the negatives of it, which we will of course address. But I think let's just start off by unpacking how important this is in our lives. It goes without saying, but we need to know what it means for our well-being.
Yeah, indeed. The family is it's the smallest unit of society, and the role of the family in anyone's life is central to their perceptions and their development of how they view the world. And
Hmm.
the role in Islam is particularly prominent because Islam gives us both the free will and the comfort of family. And family are described many times in the Quran as comforts for you. They are not your possessions, but they are loans from Allah, which can be
Hmm.
given or not given, which can be taken away at will, and you can be blessed with them. So they are a source of thankfulness if you are mindful, and if you are able to nurture the character of your family, then you have the formation of a good individual in society who's contributing towards a greater good. And essentially, a family is a cutout of any one of its individuals, and its character as a whole is understood as a function of the expanded roles of an individual, more than just yourself. Your relationship to Allah
Hmm.
is now also tested, observed, and developed in the context of how you are with
Hmm.
these other people that He has loaned to you in your life on earth.
Right. So, and then we look at quite strongly, when one does psychoanalysis or in your field of expertise, one does go into childhood backgrounds and childhood experiences, and the family dynamic plays a very, very important role in that. And then, so how do we, is it possible then to be disconnected in any way when there is a negative impact on perhaps childhood trauma, etc.?
Well, that's a interesting question, and the idea of disconnection can be both positive and negative. And what I mean by that is disconnection can be it can be negative if you've got
Mm.
an atmosphere when growing up of being perhaps neglected or unable to communicate in a free way or express yourself in a constructive way. But also, as you grow up, the positive sides of disconnection are the affirmation that once you are an adult, you are an individual, and you can productively detach yourself from issues in the past which have stunted or otherwise got in the way of your development for whatever reason, whether you're unfairly treated, neglected, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
So, with the psychoanalyst hat on, yes, it is a bit of a mine for finding dysfunctionalities. But like you said at the beginning, I think the psychotherapy as a whole tends to overplay the idea of finding some kind of trauma or dysfunction within your childhood, because the Islamic view of things is that once you have your adulthood, your childhood is a set of incidents which you can then work with in order to refine yourself, regardless of whether you have trauma or productive experiences. So there is a lot of rescue and remedy to be found in the Islamic way of viewing things, rather than this sort of fault-seeking issues that you find in secular psychotherapy.
Right. But I should think that one needs to go through that journey and that process in order to understand that not all of it is related to how you were brought up or your background. The choice you make as a Muslim, as you're saying, as you grow into adulthood. So how, the question is, how does one do that? How does one go through that process? Are we creating, you and I today, through this discussion, some sort of awareness as far as that is concerned? Because when we talk about mental health issues and personal well-being, and one goes into therapy or goes into for help to someone like yourself, I think you would then be the one to help the person become aware of this and move them out of it. So just looking at the clock, Dr. Harris, and I see we're due for a break, and I would like to expand on that discussion. So I'm going to take a quick ad break, and when we come back, we'll discuss that further. Thank you.
Inshallah.
Breaking stereotypes, moving boundaries, joining hands. Salam Media. Humanity sets the agenda.
For a long time, we've lived in a centralized world, where institutions held the all-important data and confirmed all transactions. Those times are over. Welcome to Libertas Group, a blockchain development company boasting an ecosystem that continually redefines the way we do business. Our blockchain is decentralized, making it immune to hacking or alteration, putting the power back in your hands with no middleman, so you can focus on the growth of your business. Libertas, the simplest investment choice you'll make.
Kids these days are smart, and when you're competing for their attention against their smartphones, you need to make smart choices, like using Sunfoil triple refined pure sunflower oil in every meal you make. It's naturally cholesterol-free and approved by the Heart and Stroke Foundation as part of a balanced eating plan. So whether you're cooking, frying, or baking, you get the great tasting results that'll get their attention faster than the latest app. And if that doesn't work, change the Wi-Fi password. Sunfoil. Now we're cooking.
For every child who lost a parent.
For every refugee who lost their home.
For every community without water.
For every person searching for a way to give, Africa Muslims Agency has been at your service for 35 years, connecting hearts and changing lives. Thank you for helping us to serve the needy since 1987. Support our journey by donating to Africa Muslims Agency as we commemorate 35 years of empowering, educating, and inspiring.
With so many investment options today, it's only natural that you might feel a little confused which route to take. Should I buy shares or should I invest in gold bullion? Randery Jewelers now brings you the Zahab coin, an alternative to the Kruger Rand. The Zahab coin, a solid wealth protector in its purest form of 24-karat gold, is the safest way to protect your wealth. So don't just sit there and watch your paper money depreciate. Change to gold. Call Randery Jewelers now at 031 202 4701 or visit www.rjcoin.co.za, situated at 151 Essenwood Road, Musgrave, Durban. Randery Jewelers, the family name you can trust. Breaking stereotypes, moving boundaries, joining hands. Salam Media. Humanity sets the agenda.
You're with Najma Kota, my very special guest, Dr. T.K. Harris, author and neuropsychiatrist, talking about family relationships and their connection to your overall well-being. So before the break, I was asking about this process in discovering or becoming aware that one needs to go through this path and then eventually find the answer that you pointed out, as it were, as Muslims.
Yes. Well, when someone, if you pose the question of how does, if we're looking retrospectively at somebody who is trying to understand themselves better and comes with, a set of issues, what are those issues are, and those issues they feel have got some bearing on their past, on their own personality, and on their experiences. Most the problem that can sometimes arise, what you want to avoid, is the searching for issues without necessarily having an aim in mind. And what I mean by that is sometimes it is natural. The self, the nafs, tends to be self-examinatory anyway. And in fact, one of the states nafs when you are in a state of either guilt or self-reproach or self-loathing or anxiety about who you are, what's happened, whether you were a victim or whether you were a perpetrator, and so on. And the temptation is then to follow that, to identify what went wrong, whether it was your fault, whether somebody else did something wrong. And that tends to be only partially useful, because once people reach that point, they may be, supposing they were completely correct about it, the chances are still that they won't quite know what to do with it. So whatever you went through, you say, oh, I get angry because something happened, or my mum or dad were like this or like that. But the problem itself doesn't necessarily get solved. Okay, so you're angry because of what this really means. So I would discourage people when they come to me from trying to just understand for the sake of understanding, because enough to have you believe that once you understand that you can find the solution. Whereas I sometimes use the analogy, well, okay, supposing you came to me and you said, look, there's a fire at my house. It is only partly useful for me to say, well, who set the fire? The issue is there's a fire. It doesn't really matter who set it. The point is what you're going to do about it. So when I'm in conversation with somebody, then I tend to take a more progressive view of things, which is not necessarily placing blame or looking for attributions, although that may occur, that often occurs, well, this happened here because of this or that. And mostly if you're a child, it wasn't your fault, whatever happened. And whatever someone else did may have hurt you, may have been intentional, or may also have been unintentional. I get a lot of parents equally and children who contact me because they feel bad about what happened. And some parents of the old school might have smacked their child on occasion, and now she finds that a connection with her child is somehow impeded because the child is fearful. She did what she thought was the best thing at the time, but she happened to have a very sensitive child who didn't take it very well, whereas another child who's not as sensitive or deals with it in a different way may be perfectly fine and actually be glad that their mother was of such an inclination. So it's a very variable result. So to try to unify that, what I do is I look at somebody's overall well-being as they are now, and that comes down to a set of factors, a set of different influences which the Quran sets out in many different ways, and the Hadith are also showing evidence. Things such as, your status and your outlook as a human being primarily is in your role as a Muslim and
Mhm.
whether you submit to Allah. Now, that is obligatory on anyone, regardless of what path you've been, fortunate, unfortunate, or indifferent. And that
Right.
is a good place of beginning, because reinvention or reconstruction is really focused on what you do now. It doesn't really, it's kind of independent of what happened to you in the past, if
Mm.
you can really embrace the next 5 minutes and find out what is in your interest in the next 5 minutes. Because that's essentially, Nazma, that is all that we ever have, is
Mhm.
the present moment, So
Right.
one of those things, therefore, is your purpose as a Muslim. What do I need to do here? And what are the benefits on my well-being of the various practices and instructions that I have from Allah? Be they salah, dhikr, zakat, hajj. And what is my desirable conduct? What kind of akhlaq do I need to have in order to show that I'm a person of high character
Mhm.
in this world, regardless of my past, good or bad? Then there are other factors which then can involve separate elements which are more in connection with someone's past, perhaps, but still not directly. For example, their sense of autonomy, which is
Right.
their ability to exercise their own free will, and to use that responsibly. Now, people who have had difficult pasts may find themselves being overly cautious or overly aggressive, and they come to me saying, "Oh, why do I have this issue?" And I said, "Well, actually, what seems to be happening is there is some sort of shadow effect from a time when you were behaving very cautiously or had to survive a threatening situation. So your own free will has been sort of hijacked by perceptions from your past. So it's about trying to reclaim your free will. What would you do were you completely observant and completely at peace with the fact that Allah is in control of everything? Then, instead of being cautious or overly cautious next time you meet somebody new, you would be placing your trust in Allah. And you would be also, interestingly, kind of not labeling your past as demonic or negative. What we found actually from people who have survived difficult traumas is they seem to have the same emotional reactions at the time, be they fear or shock or feeling disappointed. But in the times afterwards, they seem to be able to contextualize it and move onwards and upwards in a way that seems to be, if anything, sometimes galvanized by their own experiences. And you and I can both relate to the fact that some child might grow up. Many parents have grown up from very difficult childhoods where their parents were absent, and they seem to have almost defined themselves by learning what not to do. So subhanAllah, Allah can guide whomever He will, but He guides most those who reflect and go, okay, something horrible happened. Is that give me any guide on how to be? It can either guide me how to be or how not to be. So that is how I reclaim my autonomy. That's how I reclaim my free will. I would like to be like this, and therefore I will choose to be like this. And the more you then practice being how you're treated in the past, or away from how you're treated in the past, then defines your character going forward. But it's not, as you can imagine, I'm sort of almost talking in terms of infinite possibilities here, because it really depends on what the person brings and how much they feel that their past issues need to be unpacked or dismantled. But I tend to draw them back to future-orientated questions, which tend to be, when I start off, I actually turn the whole thing upside down and say, okay, well, look, what I would like to know is 3 or 4 things that you would like to change in your life as it is now. And that stops me from going, well, I can't change the past. Yes. So what would you like to change as you are now? And then before going on to ask them about their problems of the past, I usually sort of drag them out of that and say, actually, unlike most Western doctors or whatever, I'm going to ask you, what are you thankful to Allah for? And if they're not so sure about that, I say, well, okay, well, look at what you have in your life around you. What are the things that you are very grateful for? What do you do that is of value that other people like you for, or that you are skilled at. And if you look at sometimes troublesome people, often they start to think, well, actually, yes, because I was not listened to as a child, I was not believed. I know what it feels like to know. So as a result, I'm a very, very good listener, or I'm a very capable, I can relate to people who've been through difficulty. And I think, okay, that's a sense of wisdom. And Allah will guide us based on experiences which are positive or negative, but actually they are just forces. And a negative force, Allah says many times, there may be something in someone else which you dislike, but it is better for you. So that mindset then liberates them from the idea that I have to fix myself because something is broken. Because Allah then I can invoke Surah Baqarah and in several other parts of the Quran, the famous quote, you are never given a burden greater than you can bear. Well, if you follow that letter, then you must know that you are not broken. You might have felt broken, but that's a difference to actually being. You cannot be broken because Allah said so. So what you then experienced was some way in which you could now retrospectively look and say, okay, well, I bear the scars. However, I am also very capable in X, Y, and Z. So self-awareness really is different from being aware of what went wrong. It is more holistic. It is a question of saying, well, whatever went wrong also can be a potential chance for me to grow. And that's not to say that, oh, yes, my mother didn't hit me because it was hurtful. Yes, it hurt. But be that as it may, I can come to certain truths which are, well, whatever happened. It was entirely within my taqdeer. I can't imagine what life could be like without that because there is no other timeline. So be that as it may, what am I going to do or not do that does justice to my duty, not to my mum, not to my brother or sister, but to Allah? How would Allah see me act? And that tends to really have a very, that seems to give people a lot of catharsis. And it explains the sort of philosophical dramas that they sometimes get into. Why would Allah do this? Why did this happen? Why did He not help me? No, your path was exactly as it was. Let's look at what you have around you. And that tends to sort of help them. So, yeah, it's an integrated, progressive way of looking at a person without necessarily what I would call sometimes very empty positivity. Because that can also be. I can't, it's not right to belittle something. It was a long time ago, forget about it. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying whatever happened. Take it as a fact. But do not assume that as a fact on its own, it is harmful necessarily. It may have benefits within you. And if it does not, if all you can think it is just cruelty, then accept that. We also have the option of saying, Allah, this was what happened. I accept it. And imagine what it's like to be a person who is gifted with various events in your life. And just have a clue. Look at the events in the life of our Nabi, of our Sahabi. Broadly speaking, if we equate being a good person to having a great life, then we would not be concluding that about our prophets because most of them had really difficult lives.
Correct.
They were deprived, they had enemies, some of them were thrown down wells, they were accused, harassed. And so there is no dishonor and certainly no connotation of being unworthy when you face difficulty. In fact, one might argue, and it is said in the Quran, that when you face difficulty, it is because I am trying to assess or I'm trying to refine you. And do not be convinced that those who are having a great life, who appear to have had fantastic functional families or no trauma, that we are blessing them. You have no idea. So the only choice comes down how you do deal with what you have and make the most of where you are. I hope that's a mouthful, but I hope I'm sort of giving an indication of what it means.
Right. All right, we take our next break. When we come back, we continue our discussion with Dr. Harris on family relationships and their connection to your overall well-being.
Breaking stereotypes, moving boundaries, joining hands. Salam Media. Humanity sets the agenda.
When I think of the times you were here with me, it makes me smile so happily. Those were the days, but now you're far away. And I pray for the day when I'll see you again. May Allah protect you wherever you are. No matter where you are, you're never too far. 'Cause here in my heart is where you will remain. And I promise you this until my dying day. Oceans apart, always in my heart. Many miles in between, but that doesn't mean you're gone. Feel mine in love, in the may Allah protect you until we meet again, my friend. Time passes by, you're on my mind. Everything that I do reminds me of you. Brother, believe in these words that I say. Nothing's the same since you're gone away. May Allah protect you wherever you are. No matter where you are, you're never too far.
It's a new beginning. It's a new era.
Dr. Harris. Very interesting when you were talking about self-awareness and how to actually relate to one's past and not make it part of your DNA at the end when you start realizing and becoming aware of your personal well-being and of course, your connection with Almighty Allah. Now, when one speaks of growth in that way, it's personal growth, it's awareness, it's consciousness, it's also taqwa above all. And one finds that in a family relationship, you are at that level or you've reached that level, and others in the family, or it might be one other person in the family that's not there yet. And that's where perhaps there would be conflict. How does one navigate around that type of dynamic in a relationship, family relationship?
So to clarify, you're looking to try and understand if, supposing one person becomes, I guess, more enlightened and is more on their deen.
Correct.
He becomes upset or concerned that, other people, one other person out of all of us, maybe one person isn't doing it as much. There are several ways in which you can sort of tackle this issue. It's remarkably easy in some ways. Certainly, it depends on your role, okay, with respect to that person. If you're the father, brother, mother. So clearly, you have a role, and Islam suggests that you act within that role to support, encourage, and bring on a sense of awareness within the person holistically. And
right.
Islam encourages people to be on the same level, broadly, of being. Or if you're on a certain level, to not decrease your level to match somebody. Well, they should ideally bring their level up towards you. But so you can, in your role as a father or mother, demonstrate and encourage. So you can do the basics where it comes to education and what have you. And then you can live life where, broadly, if you cannot convince someone of something, then you have the great consolation of knowing that you don't have that responsibility anyway, because they are created. They may have been created from your body, where they, if you're a mother,
Mm.
and your product if you're a father, but ultimately they are still the possession of Allah. And
Got it.
you might take 3 children, and 2 of them might become very, very dini, and the third might not be. You don't
Right.
necessarily have any rhyme or reason for why that's the case. And there is not always a simple and clear clarity in why this might happen, and even in the superficial appearances of why people might be this way or that way. I mean, you and I know fully, and I seem to remember from my madrasa days that there were, youngsters who used to turn up to madrasa with very obedient, pursuing their Hafiz studies, pursuing this or that.
Mhm.
But somehow when they were socializing, it's almost as if they forgot it. It was just that they did what was necessary or what was within their
For
parents'
the sake
wisdom.
of. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And Allah warns us against that. He says, be religion or being righteous is not in turning your heads towards the east or west. Be careful of those who are heedless of their prayer. So it could be that your practice, but your insight is very poor. And
Right.
so it is entirely up to Allah how much of this taqwa, how much of this iman that He places in an individual. And it is then, as a child, there's nothing obliged upon them. Your duty as a parent is simply to demonstrate and encourage. And it is probably better that you do not coerce, because coercion seems to be counterproductive in the majority of cases. Certainly if it is the norm. It is perfectly acceptable to reprimand a child if they occasionally step out of line, but to use that as the norm or an atmosphere of you have to do this because I said so, tends not to create insight, and tends to create people who are either defiant openly or excessively compliant, but when your back is turned, they'll do exactly what they wanted anyway, won't they? So I would console any person to say, well, your responsibility with respect to Allah is yours. If it is somebody in your family, firstly, seek to know them. Seek to know what makes them tick. What are the higher things which they answer? Then you will discover what their levers are, what inspires them. And if you can demonstrate interest and care for what somebody totally believes in, even if it's different to yours, then you have some sort of way in by which they will then become more open to hearing what you are like. And your own journey. I mean, you describe somebody who has become more religious. And it's always inspiring for someone to tell someone else, look, I'm not telling you to become like this, but listen, this is what happened to me. And this is why I do what I do. Tell me about yourself. And that invites a conversation rather than an instruction.
Right.
People become insightful based on conversations and insights rather than instructions and commands. That's probably a better way of doing it.
Right. So there are different personality types, even though you might be siblings. There's definitely very different personalities, and sometimes that leads to conflict in families. And I think you've given us quite a bit to think about in terms of how to manage that or overcome that or rise above it in a way. But unfortunately, sometimes it has such an impact that it does actually affect your well-being in a sense, especially if it's a sibling biologically related. Always makes it more difficult in terms of managing conflict.
Yes, it does. Well, it kind of again depends on the source of the conflict. Supposing that there was essentially a person who was decidedly dysfunctional, so somebody who was gambling or aggressive or antisocial and what have you, who objectively is sort of harming themselves and those around them, then that requires a different sort of approach than somebody who quickly clashes with you because of your as you say, your temperament or your personality. If you are, for example, a child who's very, or a young person who's very interested in order and has a neat bedroom and knows when things are going to happen and schedules are, but you clash with another sibling of yours who's rather more carefree and tends to take things spontaneously, then duty upon you. Actually, what we tend to confuse is difference for conflict. In fact, Allah has given us differences not necessarily as difficulties, but He has given them as opportunities for growth and understanding. Because again, when we say the family is the smallest unit of society, if you have a family where you can be different from somebody quite markedly, but you understand that and respect their differences, and they understand and respect yours, then you have a blueprint for essentially a person who's very functional in society, rather than, say, a family where everybody was the same type. That seems all right without any conflict, but they might be arguably ill-prepared for the world, because as soon as they go out into the outside world, they'll find differences, and they'll not have been accustomed to the accommodations and adjustments and the shocks. So we come back to the idea of, well, what is your ultimate duty as a family member? And I would say similar to what you're commanded to do as a spouse, which is, in somebody in your family, your duty is not necessarily to educate them. If they are not habitually tidy, and if they don't prioritize that, and you're always habitually orderly, and you're criticizing each other for each other's faults, actually the best thing you can do is not see this as some kind of imperative for you to teach them your way. No, your specific function in the family is to be the one place where they can truly be like that and have their faults and have their characteristics and be welcome and be unjudged. That's the one. If you don't get it from there, then you're not really going to get it from the rest of the world, right? The rest of the world is always going to find issues with you. But if you do this for your spouse or for your son, then you can be exactly as you like. You're not harming yourself or people around you. Then I am here to make you feel valid for who you are. For the way, and that actually tends to be far more productive, because it encourages what I'm talking about, this strength in diversity. Yeah, so that's kind of my take on that.
Right. It also speaks to interconnectedness and coexisting. I think sometimes some people isolate themselves from drama and conflict, but you can't avoid that. You can't stay there forever. So I think the tools you've just given us is a great way to actually remain interconnected. And the more one, the way you describe this, the more one practices this consciously, one only sees that you're moving yourself towards the higher nafs, so to speak, and that's a very wonderful place to be in. I think people would want to be surrounded. People would want to be in your company if you have that kind of demeanor and consciousness. It just comes. It brings about a lot of the peace and tranquility around you as well. So I think those are very, very important tools that you've just given us to work on and be aware of. And we go for another break.
Listen to something fresh. Listen to Salam Media, your humanitarian broadcaster.
Hunger ratios in South Africa are on an upward trajectory since the beginning of COVID-19. Over 23% of South African households experienced hunger last summer. At SANZAF, we aim to ease the hunger struggles of those in need by providing freshly prepared meals daily. You can be part of this by donating towards the SANZAF Meals Project. Visit sanzaf.org.za or call us on 011 834 6046. SANZAF, changing lives through development and relief.
Online schooling? Why not? Kurtuba Online Academy is the leading global online Islamic school from grade R to matric, offering South African caps and international syllabus. And it doesn't stop there. We also offer online madrasa for every grade. For more information, visit www.kurtubaonline.co.za. Kurtuba Online Academy, the leading global online Islamic school.
Discover the Africa of your dreams and surround yourself with her spectacular beauty. Relax beneath her serene sunsets and explore wildlife at its natural best. It's where the pride of Africa comes together. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve. Get to know the Big Five or cruise on an elephant safari game drive. Interact with lion and tiger cubs and enjoy world-class halal cuisine while we pamper you during your 5-star stay. Indulge in the true African experience. For reservations, call now on 042-203-1400 or visit kwantu.co.za. The Kwantu Private Game Reserve, the place of gathering.
South Africa, are you ready? Penny Appeal South Africa is proud to announce, for the first time in South Africa, For Good Tour featuring Saeed, Rehan Karim, Muad and friends coming to your city in November 2022.
I'm grateful for every single thing you've given me.
Cape Town, 19th of November. Johannesburg, 20th of November. Durban, 26th of November. Get your tickets via Quicket while seats are available. Proceeds in aid of Children of the World Project. Contact 031 1100 573 or email info@pennyappeal.org.za. See you there. For Good Tour, brought to you by Penny Appeal South Africa.
Listen to something fresh. Listen to Salam Media.
Dr. Harris, the family unit is very, very important in society as a whole, because it holds together the fabric of society. It's the structural standard that we have, especially given that Islam is such a social religion. Everything revolves around that, and a strong family unit is where it all starts. That's the foundation. And one finds that if when that unity is fractured, perhaps through divorce or sibling rivalry, there's a huge amount of difficulty in terms of well-being. And how does this then affect one's personal well-being?
Yeah, so we know that from from as you've stated, the family is like a template for how a good society or a bad society could be founded. You get families which are authoritarian or negative or dysfunctional, and which are very accepting or tolerant or diverse. And togetherness is broadly thought of as a positive thing. And when families split up, they are considered to be, no longer together. But in psychological terms and in terms of well-being, that's not always the case. And it's often mentioned by, people often of older generations that look at the rates that we have these days, really something going wrong. Well, it might not be the case, as you're well aware. A lot of people in our old days were married without their consent, and they stayed together simply in order because they had no alternative, or because they wanted to they didn't feel they had the empowerment or the confidence or even the resources to separate, and they lived terminally unhappy lives. Their own autonomy and their own gifts were, if you like, squandered in favor of just trying to stay together, because that's what society thinks is a yardstick for a functional family. Well, to be functional versus to be together are not necessarily the same things, and that's kind of how I approach any one individual or any particular family. Certainly, togetherness is a proxy. It's a sort of shorthand for, well, they're together, so it probably is okay, and that may well be the case. But equally, if they are not together, we know, Islam doesn't prohibit divorce or breakups in families if that is the best way forward given their circumstances. And in the times after divorce, people find that they may able to become more free and be able to sort of live their life, or find a partner who would be far more suited to them. So I'd sort of take it all on an individual level. There is a fallout, of course, from there's certain things that always are going to have a fallout. I'm not inviting an entirely overly liberal secular view where, to be a single mom is somehow totally fine. Well, actually, the statistics don't speak well. If you don't have a father figure in the family, if there's only one parent, then you're going to have higher rates of all sorts of stuff, higher rates of crime, lower social development, and higher rates of yourself, if you're from a single family, to have a dysfunctional relationship when you grow up. So it's not just saying everyone can do what they wish, but just in having a conversation which is really about, I would measure someone's happiness by what they have gained or lost from any given event. And you might argue that in the days when people were married forcibly, that was a great loss. It was un-Islamic. And yet they accepted it as a cultural norm. And yet the basis upon the consent of their marriage was flouting the rules of Islam. So one might be very hardline and go, all the years you lived thereafter were somehow founded on a very shaky foundation. So whether you stay together or not, one has to then say, I don't know, it seems as if you did what was required of you. But only it's down to between you and Allah what you did about that. Yes, if you were forced to marry, it doesn't mean that is a doomsday signal. It is also still down to you. Okay, these are your circumstances. How do you try to be the finest person you can be within that? And you can see many times when that has worked out perfectly well. But I also hold it in respect for those people who say, look, it didn't work out for me, and after X many years, I felt I was unable to hold it together anymore. And the fallout from that may be both positive and negative. If a couple split and they have children, perhaps it was certainly much better for the mental health of the partners involved, but perhaps there will also be a fallout where the children will not fare so well. And it's rarely straightforward, isn't it? It's because
absolutely
there's always pluses and minuses about these things.
Yes.
So don't take things as a shorthand and just do your best given whatever your circumstances are.
Right, and the common fabric in what you've mentioned now, common thread, I beg your pardon, throughout this discussion that we've had, I've just noticed that you're saying, always just go back to what's working for you, and trust in Allah's will, and put your trust in Allah for whatever it is that you're struggling with, and eventually see the good in it. It's a wonderful way to approach life, whether it be in family relationships or any other.
Indeed, I hope that's kind of really the message of Islam generally, because the meaning of the word itself is peace through submission, and to recognize the things that you can control, and to do your best to reasonably do service, do justice to the things that you can control, but then to accept that as an individual, be it with your circumstances, you may not be granted control of certain things and other people are, but then to not feel as if, if only my life was like theirs, or if only more people could be like me, or whatever. Allah created us all separately for a reason. So my advice broadly is become the best version of yourself rather than a poor
Right.
imitation of someone else. Right? That would definitely.
Absolutely. Well said. Yes. And also not to always think like a victim. Just move forward with it. Because as long as you stay in that self pity state, you're just not going to get out of that melancholy or sadness or anxiety or depression, which of course puts your health at risk and your mental health at risk as well. So thank you so much, Dr. TK Harris, once again for giving us your time on this segment of the Mid Morning Talk with Najma Kota. And we do appreciate that you've extended the time for us as well today. May Allah grant you success in everything that you do and keep you safe and healthy, inshallah.
Subhanallah, and wa alaikum salam to you itself and your listeners. Jazakallah.
Ameen. Thank you. All right, that's it from Mid Morning Talk for this week. Inshallah, I'll be back with you next week at the same time on a Monday between 11 and 1. We have, of course, our segments broken up into 3, which is from 11 to 12. It's our profile interview, and then 12 o'clock, wellness and psychology, Islamic psychology, if you like. And then, of course, travel. So lots to look forward to. For next week, I am looking forward to being with you again. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.